Well, if it's Wednesday morning, if it's 11:30 in the morning, it is time for another episode of the About Mansfield Consumer Advice Series. I'm Steve Casillo. Appreciate you being here today. Chances are you are doing one of three things today. You're either watching this live on Facebook, you're watching the video on YouTube or LinkedIn, or you are listening to the podcast on your favorite podcast player. Whatever it is, appreciate you being here today. And happy post-Thanksgiving. I hope your Thanksgiving was wonderful. And as we do every Wednesday morning, we bring in our trademark attorney, Susana Mahady, and we talk about trademark and why it's important to have a trademark with your business or, you know what? Uh, I don't think I've ever asked you this question, Susana. Would a person benefit from having a trademark as opposed to a business, right, as opposed to a business?
Well, we have to remember that a trademark has to be associated or has to be used in connection with a good or a service that you provide. So
Okay.
if you are providing any type of service, then yeah, you could have that name trademarked for whatever service you're providing.
Gotcha.
So that's how it
First of
works.
all, welcome back to About Mansfield.
Thank you for having
And
me.
so we've been doing this series on trademarks. This is now our third episode with this, and going back to the very first episode, which was basically Trademarks 101, what is a trademark, and how do we go about applying for a trademark. Today we're going to get a little more specific. What type of evidence is acceptable when applying for a trademark? And, I think that's a pretty good question to start with. Let's go ahead and answer the question.
All right. Well, it's, there's a few parts to this, but I'm going to try to be as basic as I can. As I said before, every trademark has to be associated with a good or a product or a service. And so when you're submitting your application, you have to provide evidence to the USPTO, the United States Patent and Trademark Office, of how that mark is being used, whether it's on the product that you're creating and selling, or if it's how it's being used in connection with the service that you're providing. So, for example, the type of evidence is going to depend on what it is, if it's a good or a service. A good could be, if you're selling coffee cups, or if you're selling pens or something tangible, then that is how that's what the good portion of it would be. And then a service would be like if you're a coach, or you are a bookkeeper, or you're a photographer or event planner. Those are service-based professions or businesses that would also need to provide a evidence of how the mark is being used in connection with that service.
So you've got the product, the goods or the service. Is that what you trademark, or what goes along with the trademark? What part of evidence do you need to submit to the trademark office?
Okay, so that's a great question. What happens is once you've got your great little trademark that you made up, and it's some name that hopefully some very unique arbitrary name that will have a better chance of passing through the process. So then you have to be able to show that it's being used, and you have to provide the evidence that will actually show the mark with the services that are being provided or the goods that are being sold or provided to the customer. So for example, if you have a product, then acceptable evidence could be a picture of the item that actually shows the trademark on it. Or you could have packaging materials that have the logo on the material, on the packaging material. Sometimes you can provide, if it's like a little technical gadget that it's so small that you can't really see the mark on it, you could provide an instruction manual that has a picture of the mark with the description of the product. So those are acceptable types of evidence for a product.
And then
With respect to, oh, go ahead.
if going back to something that was too small to take a photo of, would then submitting maybe that product to, even though it's tiny, would that be something that you would submit?
No, I mean, I think that, providing something that's, it needs to be like a photograph or a document or, a screenshot of a website sometimes will work, but that's more for like service-based types of businesses. But no, the trademark office is not going to accept the product itself. It's going to have to be a rendition of the item.
Okay.
So it might be different for patents, but this is a little bit different. So in terms of providing evidence for a service, what's been happening more is a lot of these new businesses are online. And so you've got, e-commerce, or you've got, all these social media websites and posts that people put their brands on. So it's acceptable now to just submit a screenshot of, for instance, a web page, but it has to show the mark, the actual trademark that you're applying for, in connection with what services are being provided. So it has to show that on the actual screenshot. So that's something that people sometimes get tripped up with. They will submit a screenshot of a web page, but it doesn't really say what the services are. It only shows the mark, and so that could be rejected. You could also sometimes just provide a business card, as long as it has the copy of the logo and or mark, and it shows also what services are being provided. For example, if you're a real estate agent and you have a picture of your logo saying, hey, we buy and sell houses, then that could be an acceptable piece of evidence.
Question, then let's go back to, because this podcast is being presented by About Mansfield, and so see if I get this right here. We have branded ourselves as your local audio newspaper. And if it had that little TM next to it, then that would be, if I were to screenshot that off of our website, that would be acceptable to the patent, not the patent, the trademark office.
Well, there are some requirements. And so when you do a screenshot of a web page or something that's showing the mark, it has to be able to include in that screenshot what it is that that mark represents, like what is it being used for. So if you have About Mansfield, or if you have your logo, you need to be able to show on that same web page that it, what is it that you are providing, updated services or news about the community, or something that describes what that mark is being, or that logo or that slogan is being used for. And you also have to make sure that the date that that screenshot was captured shows on that screenshot, and you have to show the URL. So there's certain requirements to make sure that that screenshot is acceptable.
In the minute or so that we have left, is there anything that you want to recap, or is there any additional information regarding submitting acceptable evidence for trademark?
Only that, because of the risk of rejection, if the proper evidence is not submitted, it's really important to try to speak to someone about whether or not what you propose to submit with your application is acceptable. Otherwise, you do risk getting that application rejected and having to either resubmit or have other complications with your application. And so it's a good idea to just make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row before you submit that application.
And if someone has a service, a product, and they want to make sure that they have their ducks in the row, how can they reach out to Susana Mahady?
They can reach me through my website, which is mahadylaw.com, MAHADYLAW.com, or you can email me at smahady@mahadylaw.com.
MahadyLaw.com, M-A-H-A-D-Y, MahadyLaw.com. That's Susana Mahady. Susana, we do this every Wednesday. This is our 10-minute nugget of information. And let's do it again next week.
Sounds good. See you then.